I sat on the edge of the bed, the room bathed in a soft amber glow from the bedside lamp. The house creaked with the familiar sounds of settling wood, but the night felt unusually still. My watch ticked steadily on my wrist, a constant reminder of the late hour. I glanced at its face. Midnight. With a sigh, I slipped it off and placed it on the nightstand, the ticking growing fainter, yet still present, as if the room itself held its breath. Just as I began to lie back, a soft knock sounded at the door. My heart skipped a beat, though I'd heard that knock countless times before. The quiet voice that followed was just as familiar, each word tinged with fear.
"Dad, I'm scared. Can I sleep with you?"
I sighed, sitting up again. "What happened, sweetie? Why are you still up?"
"I hear scary noises in my room."
I pushed aside the covers, feeling the chill of the wooden floorboards beneath my feet. "Let's check together, okay? There's nothing to be scared of," I said as I walked to the door. When I opened the door, there she stood, my little girl, her eyes wide and shimmering with unshed tears. I took her hand, small and warm, in mine. "Come on, let's take a look." We walked down the dimly lit hallway to her room. The air felt thick with something unnameable, a presence that seemed to press in on us from all sides. But I shook off the feeling, telling myself it was just the lingering effects of sleep clinging to my mind. We reached her door, and I flipped on the light. "There, see? Nothing to be scared of," I said, my voice softer now, as if trying to convince us both. She stood by my side, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Her eyes darted around the room as if expecting something to leap from the shadows.
"But, Daddy, when you turn off the light, I can hear the noises."
I knelt beside her bed, running a hand over the soft quilt. "I can't hear anything, sweetie. It's probably just the wind howling. But I'll stay with you tonight, okay? Just until you fall asleep." Her face lit up with a smile, and she climbed into bed, the fear momentarily forgotten. I lay down beside her, feeling the warmth of her small body next to mine. She held on to me tightly, as if I could shield her from whatever haunted her in the darkness. "Just for tonight," I whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Her breathing slowed, and soon she was asleep, her hand still clutching my shirt. I lay there staring up at the ceiling, listening to the silence of the house. But it wasn't entirely silent. There was something there, a faint, rhythmic noise, like the ticking of a clock or the beat of a heart. I told myself it was just the watch on the nightstand, but deep down, I knew it was something else. Something I couldn't name, something I didn't want to face. Eventually, sleep claimed me, pulling me into its depths. Morning came too soon, pulling me from a dreamless sleep with the sound of my wife's voice calling from somewhere far off.
"Get up, you fell asleep again in her room,"
she chided, her tone weary, as if we'd had this conversation countless times before. I blinked against the light streaming through the window, my mind still foggy with sleep. I sat up, feeling the weight of the night still clinging to me. My daughter's bed was empty, the covers pulled neatly to the side as if she had never been there at all.
"Come on, we need to talk."
My wife's voice urged again, closer this time, more insistent. I got up and made my way down the hallway to the kitchen, where she stood by the sink, her back to me. The smell of coffee filled the air, but there was a coldness in the room that had nothing to do with the temperature. She turned to face me, her eyes tired, her face drawn.
"How long are you going to keep doing this to yourself?"
she asked, her voice softening.
"You can't keep going into her room every night."
I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. A part of me knew she was right, but the thought of not being there when my daughter needed me felt like a betrayal.
"You have to let her go,"
she continued, her voice breaking slightly.
"It's been a decade. You need to accept that she's gone."
The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I shook my head. turning away from her, unable to meet her gaze. "I can't," I whispered. I still hear her. She still comes to me every night, scared and alone. I can't just leave her." She sighed, her shoulders slumping.
I know it's hard, but she's not the only one you need to let go.
The words pierced through me, sharp and cold, but before I could respond, she was gone. The kitchen was empty, the only sound the faint ticking of my watch from the bedroom. I stood there alone, the silence pressing in around me. I lay down on my bed, the events of the night finally catching up to me. My mind was heavy with the memories I had tried so hard to bury. But now, as I closed my eyes, I felt a strange sense of relief, a quiet acceptance that perhaps it was time to let go. The ticking of the watch on the nightstand was a steady rhythm, a comforting beat that lulled me toward sleep. For the first time in a decade, I felt at peace. The weight of my grief and guilt began to lift, and I allowed myself to drift into the darkness of sleep. But then, as the shadows closed in around me, something felt wrong. I bolted upright in bed, my heart pounding. The room was exactly as it had been, but the peace I'd felt was gone, replaced by a gnawing sense of unease. The watch on the nightstand continued its relentless ticking, but the sound now grated against my ears, each tick a sharp jab in the silence. And then I heard it, the soft knock at the door. My breath caught in my throat. I knew that knock, but that wasn't possible. I had said goodbye. I had let them go. But the knock came again, a little louder this time, more insistent.
"Dad, I'm scared. Can I sleep with you?"
I swung my legs out of bed, my body moving on autopilot as I stumbled to the door. My hands trembled as I reached for the doorknob, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. I opened the door, not knowing what to expect. My daughter? My wife? Or something far worse? But the hallway was empty, just as it had been before. The same dim light spilled across the wooden floor, and the same oppressive silence filled the air. I felt my heart race as I turned back toward my bed, and that's when I saw it. The watch on the nightstand had stopped ticking. I froze, staring at it, waiting for the hands to move again, but they didn't. The room grew colder, the air thickening with a dread that pressed down on my chest like a physical weight. The silence was deafening, a vacuum that swallowed every sound. And then, slowly, the hands of the watch began to turn, backward. I stumbled back, my mind reeling as the room seemed to spin around me. The ticking resumed, but it was off, wrong, each tick now echoing with an ominous finality. I tried to tell myself it was a dream, just a dream, but deep down I knew it wasn't. I turned to the door, and there it was again, that soft knock, now echoing with an unnatural reverberation.
"Dad, I'm scared."
The voice was different this time, distorted, as if spoken through layers of water and stone. My body shook with terror, and I backed away from the door, my hands clamping over my ears, trying to block out the sound, but the voice grew louder, more persistent, filling my head with a relentless chant.
"Dad, I'm scared. Dad, I'm scared."
The room seemed to close in on me, the walls pressing inward as the knocking grew louder, faster, until it was a pounding on the door, shaking the very foundations of the house. I screamed, the sound ripping from my throat, but it was swallowed by the pounding, the ticking, the voice. And then, as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The room was still. The air was cold and dead. The watch on the nightstand was quiet, its hands frozen in place. I blinked, my heart still racing, and looked around the room. Everything was just as it had been before. The bed was neatly made. The hallway was empty. The house was silent. And then I heard the knock.
"Dad, I'm scared. Can I sleep with you?"
My blood turned to ice. I turned slowly to the door, my mind unraveling as I realized the truth. This was no nightmare. This was my reality, my endless, inescapable reality. The door creaked open on its own, and I braced myself for the darkness that awaited on the other side, knowing that it would come for me again and again and again.